before. My name is Adrian Sharp. I'm the director of the Richmond Peace Education Center, and I will be co-moderating tonight's program together with my friend and colleague, Dr. Jennifer Sanchez, who teaches in the Religious Studies program at the School of World Studies, and is also on the board of the So on behalf of the entire Richmond Peace Education Center, welcome. Thank you so much for being here for this important discussion. And we thank very much our two speakers this evening, Ryan Gerard and Mary Severson, for being with us and for sharing their wisdom and their personal stories and their analysis with us tonight. Both of their perspectives are so critically important at this time. I wanted to just open with a couple of words in terms of to help kind of frame why we at the Richmond Peace Education Center organized this forum tonight with the help of a lot of these students. We feel this discussion tonight is crucially important. We as a country have been in a state of perpetual war in the Middle East on multiple fronts for over 13 and a half years since 9/11. We are told that these different wars from Afghanistan to Iraq to the campaign of Libya to the drone strikes in Yemen, Somalia, and Pakistan, we're told that they're all about the global war on terrorism, they're all about keeping us safe from terrorism. And yet, they also seem very much to be part of a much longer-term, older strategic commitment on the part of the United States to shape, exercise control over, and try to remake the Middle East. We have jumped from campaign to campaign over the last 13 plus years. There's always a new bogeyman, a new really terrifying bogeyman to respond to. You all probably remember when it was Saddam Hussein in the Taliban, and then it was Muammar Gaddafi. For a minute there it was Bashar al-Assad of Syria, and now it is ISIS. But there's always a bogeyman that seems very frightening and that we are told we urgently need to respond to. And yet, objectively, by many objective measures, it seems that these wars have not made us safer. It seems that these wars have actually inflamed forces of extremism, that they've actually increased sectarian violence and division and chaos. They've come at a really horrific cost in terms of our own country and our children's future. We borrowed the cost of these wars from our children. So every one of their children, their children, their children, will be paying for these wars for the generations to come. And our troops have paid a terrible price. But the people who have borne the steepest price, the deepest burden for these wars, have, of course, been the people of Iraq. We left that country in disarray with more than 1 million Iraqis killed. And the people of the greater Middle East. And yet, it's like we're constantly lurching from one conflict to the other, and we never really stop and pause and reflect and think about the fundamentals, and think about what really is our overarching strategy in this region. What are we really doing? Do we have the right to be doing what we're doing? What are the costs that we're paying for this strategy? And we at the Peace Center feel that as we look forward, next year is the 15th anniversary of 9/11, which is a real historical sort of marking point in the trajectory of our country. We feel that as we approach that 15th anniversary of 9/11, it's critically important for us to stop and pause and think and have some of these deeper conversations that really get at some of the fundamentals and dig deep and consider the lessons that we've learned that we perhaps should have learned from our foreign policy decisions and foreign policy mistakes over the last 13 years. So, with that, we thank you so much again for being here for this important conversation. Tonight we have, I guess, a couple of specific goals. One goal, in my mind at least, is to really kind of illuminate the human impact of our recent wars. So both of our two speakers have in different ways been directly impacted by America's recent wars in Iraq and the greater Middle East. And they will be sharing some of their stories with us, which is really important because with these recent wars, most of us are so insulated from the impact, and I think that's by design. We no longer have a draft, we have a professional army, and if you don't have a loved one in the military deployed overseas, you really can just go about your life almost forgetting that these wars are being fought in all of our names. So today, we're going to be grappling with some of the human costs and human impact. And then secondly, we're going to try to have the beginnings of a deeper conversation, and a deeper conversation I was talking about a minute ago, stepping back and really thinking about the logic. America's overall strategy for the Middle East, which is a very important conversation to be having now as we have just, as a country, launched a new campaign against ISIS, or perhaps a new phase of an old campaign in Iraq. And of course, President Obama has requested authorization of that war from Congress. And this spring, Congress will be having an important debate and a vote about that authorization. And the Peace Center actually has a position about that authorization. We have a statement over there on the table, and we're encouraging people to make their voices heard, whatever your perspective is. So please still be on your way out to take one of those statements and contact your elected leaders about it. But it's a critical moment to be having this discussion, and we thank you so much for being here and for being here. And now I'll introduce Jennifer Sanchez.
Hi. So I wanted to really sort of thank my two classes that helped organize this event. So my International Social Justice class and my Religion, Globalization, and Social Justice class all participated in helping to advertise this event. They wrote press releases. They did the lovely flyers that we see. And especially Grayson, one of the students, but is also an intern at the Education Center. And so could my students just stand for a second and recognize? Start with a short exercise. We're going to read you a list of questions, and I'm going to ask you to stand and remain standing if you can answer yes to any of the questions. So please stand if you are from or have a family member from any country in the Middle East that has been affected by the war.
Stand if you know a U.S. military member who has ever been deployed to the Middle East.
For the money this individual will spend on the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, we could have paid instead for full 4-year scholarships for almost 1 million college students in Virginia. So please stand if you have college debt or expect to graduate with college debt.
We have college debt.
So please look around, and then you can sit down now. So, thank you. So oftentimes we're sort of disconnected from what happens with their wars, the various wars that we're involved in. So we wanted to make sure that we can draw those connections between what's happening to us at home here and the wars there. So Grayson's going to introduce our speakers.
Welcome everyone. Hope you're having a good night. We're going to hear comments from 2 speakers and then have time for conversation at the end. Our first speaker, Rod Gerard, is the Policy Impact Coordinator at the American Friends Service Committee's Office of Public Policy and Advocacy in Washington, D.C. He is widely recognized as an expert on political, social, and economic developments in the Middle East. He has testified in numerous congressional hearings and briefings, and he is also a frequent guest on national and international media outlets, including MSNBC. He was born in Baghdad and emigrated to the U.S. in 2005. Our second speaker, Larry Severson, is a resident of Chesterfield County. Severson is the father of 4 sons, 3 of whom served multiple deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan. He has been a steadfast critic of the 2 wars since they began. Here's Rod Gerard.
Thank you, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes,
a little
high.
Not well.
Yeah. Like this?
Yeah, better.
Well, thank you, everyone, for coming in tonight. Such a gorgeous night with very nice weather. So I apologize to have to spend it inside here talking about wars and politics. I work with the American Friends Service Committee. It's a Quaker organization, pretty old Quaker organization. It was established in 1917. I'm based in Washington, D.C. And when the question was asked about if one of the audiences or people in the audience know people who were affected by the war directly or from countries that were affected, I kind of laughed because I'm half Iraqi and half Palestinian. My wife is Iranian, so I have a few yeses. I also lived in other countries around the region, including Saudi Arabia and Jordan. And the question about the U.S. involvement in the Middle East is such a complicated question. It goes back decades, and it has been costing the U.S. taxpayers billions and billions of dollars. 3 of the top recipients of U.S. military aid happen to be in the Middle East. Israel, which has received tens of billions of dollars or tax dollars money over the decades, and continues to receive over $3.1 billion of military aid to this day. Egypt, that receives over $1 billion every year of military aid, and now Iraq with over $5 billion of military aid this year. So there's a lot of involvement there and a lot of confidence. So I wanted to talk about my experience in the war in Iraq as an example to this U.S. involvement in the Middle East. I was in Iraq in the 1990s and in the early 2000s. I was there during the 2003 invasion. And actually last week marked the 12th anniversary of the fall of Baghdad. April 9th was the day that we saw the first U.S. tank go down our streets in Baghdad. And as you all know, that the situation in Iraq has been deteriorating since. I think many Americans recognize and realize the size of the destruction in Iraq now. And I don't think it takes a lot to prove that Iraq is a country in crisis. But what's important to mention is that this deterioration happened over the last 23 years. The reason why it started 23 years ago is that is when the U.S. started bombing Iraq. So unlike conventional wisdom in the U.S. where we imagine the war starting in 2003, that was the military invasion and occupation. But the U.S. war with Iraq actually started way back in 1991, before many of the people in this room were even born. And the U.S. policy in Iraq did not really change that much in the last 23 years. It's more or less the same policy and the same idea of engagement in the country. So the policy always depended on military intervention and bombing Iraq in different ways. And there were different excuses given to justify this military intervention. And the policy always pushed Iraq towards partition. There was the theme of the U.S. engagement with Iraq has been that if Iraq was partitioned into a Sunnistan and the Shiistan and the Kurdistan, that would create a better solution for Iraqis. That's the theory in Washington, D.C. So I'll talk a little bit about that, but starting from now. So now we all know the current crisis is ISIS, the ISIS crisis. And the ISIS crisis is presented as this extremely dangerous situation that we have to step in and send troops and send bombs to deal with an uniquely evil group in Iraq. But when you look at the larger picture, President Obama is the 4th consecutive U.S. president to announce that he has authorized bombing Iraq. The excuses has moved a lot. Now it's ISIS.